Hello and welcome to Narayana IS. I'm Pratik, your faculty for daily news analysis. Students, in today's DNA, we shall be focusing on four most important topics from the Hindu newspaper. But before we begin with the four articles, let us go through a motivational quote of the day. And what is it? You'll bloom, you'll prosper if you take the time to water yourself. The essence of this quote is self-care. Now, when it comes to self-care, you need to take care of your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. Essentially, it is important to nurture yourself because only when you nurture yourself, if you take care of yourself, you have high chance of success in your life. So make sure that you're caring yourself so as to be fit to cross all the hurdles and emerge successful in life. On this note, let us start with today's game. Now, all those students who want to clear this year's prelims, Narayana IS has prepared a self-study planner. So, if you can simply scan the QR code seen or which you can see on your screen and download the application, in the application you can have access to the self-study planner. Now, this planner will help you strategize as in how to prepare for the prelims this year, right? So this planner has given sufficient amount of time for each and every subject including revision. So this planner will help you to have a structured approach to attempt this year's prelims. So I request you to please scan the QR code, download the application and access the planner for prelims 2025. And for those students who are aspiring to attempt the examination next year 26 or 27, we have come up with 1 year and 2 year prelims cum means integrated course where the focus will be on prelims, means as well as interview stages. So it will be an integrated preparation. So those students who are interested can enroll yourself by scanning the QR code. You please register yourself, fill in the details and our team will get back to you with all the information required. Right? So these are the four topics of the day. The first topic is taken from text and context page number 3. The topic is why are persons with disabilities worried about the digital protection and data privacy rules. So first we'll understand this act and the rules that the government has framed to implement this particular act, and who are the PWDs and what are the concerns associated with the rules. The second article is taken from Hindu page number 12. Now this article highlights the contribution of Indian peacekeepers in the global conflicts. So this article will make you understand how India is playing a prominent role in resolving the global conflicts. How? By contributing her troops, soldiers. The third article is taken from Hindu page number 7. Now in this article we'll understand how the production of ethanol is impacting the environment. Though the government of India is focusing on the ethanol blended petrol program, thereby reducing the dependence on the fossil fuels, right? This article helps us to understand what is ethanol, the usage of ethanol and the implication on the environment. Why is there resistance against the ethanol or the production of ethanol? The fourth article is taken from Hindu page number 8. Now this article makes us understand the implication of foreign policy of the United States on India and the EU relationship. So these are the four topics of the day that we shall be discussing. Let us start with the first topic. The title is why are PWDs worried about the DPDP rules. So in this article, we'll understand the act as well as who are persons with disabilities. You may map this particular topic with the GS paper 2. In GS paper 2, we have government policies and interventions, right, for development in various sectors, or and then the issues arising out of the design and implementation. Now, why this topic becomes important is because questions have been asked in the UPSC examination regarding the persons with disabilities. So, this Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 16 remains only a legal document without intense sensitization of government functionaries and citizens regarding disability. So, it is important that you understand what is this act, right? That's the reason understanding this topic becomes important for the examination. So, what is the context? The context is that the Indian government, right? The Indian government is finalizing the rules for this particular act. What is the name of the act? Digital Protection and Data Privacy Act 2023. See, what are the rules? In order to implement any law, any act, rules are framed by the government, which means how this act is to be implemented. For that, the government frames rules, right? So the government is finalizing rules to implement this act. Essentially, the rules will regulate, will manage how the personal data is processed, how our personal data, for example, PAN card, PAN number, Aadhaar number, mobile number, how our personal data will be processed. It tries to balance what? Our privacy and lawful data use, which means here the government is trying to balance our privacy, data privacy, and then use of our data by the authorities, which means, let's say, whenever the government wants to use our data, then the government should be in a position to use our data for national interest. So here the balance is between protecting the privacy rights of people and then legitimate use of the personal data by the authorities. However, Section 9 Clause 1 of the Act is creating or has caused concern or controversy. Why? Because this section, it gives the power to the legal guardians, which means the people who are with disabilities, who are, let's say, who have vision issues, who are, let's say, physically they are disabled. So people who are disabled, this section allows the legal guardians of people with disabilities to take decision on behalf of the PWDs, which means I am a PWD, my legal guardian will take decision on behalf of me. This section allows legal guardian to take decisions on behalf of PWDs, that is persons with disabilities. Now the activists of PWDs, they argue that this provision, which provision? This provision infantilizes PWDs, which means it sort of takes away the autonomy of the PWDs. This section goes against the interests of the PWDs, is what the activists are arguing, right? Let us try to understand first who are people with disabilities. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This UN convention, please remember, has defined PWDs who have physical, mental, intellectual or sensory problems, impairments, which means issues. Physical, who cannot walk. Mental, who cannot think. Cognitive issues, right, who cannot think, who do not have the ability to think and take decisions. Intellectual and sensory, who cannot sense things, right, which in interaction with other barriers, other hurdles may stop their full participation in society. So, because of the hurdles, because of these impairments or because of these issues, people cannot participate in society effectively. These are referred to as persons with disabilities. Now, these are some facts about the PWDs. According to 2011 census, there are 26.8 million PWDs, out of which constitute 2.21 percentage of the country's total population, right? 14.9 million are men and then 11.9 are women, right? So 69 percentage of the PWDs live in the rural areas, remaining in urban areas, right? And then types of disabilities. So 20 percentage have disability in movement, they cannot move. 19% visual problem, 19% hearing impairment, and 8 have multiple disabilities. So these are some stats about the PWDs. So I request you to please go through it. Age group 10 to 19. Majority number of PWDs lie in this age group. Employment 36 percentage are only employed. And then World Bank says that the number of PWDs is around 50, 40 and 80 million. Now, this is very, very important to understand. Right of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. Right? Question was asked in the year 2017 on this particular act. Now, this act, it has expanded the disabilities to 21. Right, which means the number of disabilities have been increased under the act made in the year 2016. You don't have to remember each and every disability, just try to remember the number. And this number 21 increasing the multiple disabilities and covering under this act, it aligns with the United Nations Convention or the United Nations Principle. One. Second, people who fall under PWDs, they get reservation in government jobs, and the reservation was increased from 3 to 4 percentage under the act. Then 5% reservation in higher education institutions, including the private ones. Each and every point is important for your prelims examination. They can ask you the provision of this particular act. Then it mandates barrier-free access, which means people who are with disabilities, they can have access to public spaces, transport, right, and other services with strict timelines. For example, let's say public spaces, be it the theaters, malls, or for that matter, transportation, metros, right. Social security, they get free education 6 to 18, right. They also get disability pensions and financial aid for assistive devices. For example, let's say there's a machine through which you can hear. So government also gives financial aid. And then this is very, very important. Introduces limited guardianship, which means a person who is not in a position to take decisions because of, let's say, intellectual or let's say because of mental issues. This act introduces limited guardianship, which means a guardian can take decision on behalf of the PWD. Legal protection establishes special courts. Special courts, why? To fast track the complaints, which means the issues or let's say the legal loopholes, or if the PWDs are facing issues with respect to implementation of the law, then special courts are made to resolve the grievances, problems of PWDs. Now, what is this act? Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023. This act is India's first comprehensive data protection. It protects our data. Which data? PAN card, PAN number, Aadhaar number, mobile number. It aims to regulate how personal data, which means how our personal data will be used by the government, by the social media companies, be it Amazon, be it Facebook, or let's say Google Pay, and how our data will be stored. This act, it seeks to protect individuals' privacy rights, which means our data will not be used for, or our data will not be misused. So here our privacy rights is being taken care of. At the same time, the governments can also use your data for legitimate purpose, let's say for banking purpose, for income tax purpose. So here our rights are protected, which means this act will ensure that the businesses are not misusing our data and the government can use our data for legitimate purpose. And this act is applies to any personal data collected in digital form. For example, PAN number, Aadhaar number, and any data that you provide to the authorities. And both Indian and foreign entities, Indian and the foreign companies processing personal data. For example, we use Instagram. Instagram is a foreign company. Facebook is a foreign company. WhatsApp is a foreign company. Twitter, foreign company. Then we have Google Pay, foreign company. So, and then Paytm, Indian company. So, how this will applicable to both, applies to both Indian and the foreign companies. So, this act essentially makes us understand how our personal data will be used, processed and stored. Now, these are the key provisions of the act. One, right of individuals like us. We are referred in our data principle to access. We can also take our or delete our data from the public platform. Right to grievance redressal, we can lodge a complaint. Then right to nominate someone. So in case I can nominate someone, in case I die, how my data will be used? I can nominate someone, that is nominee. I hope you understood who are data principals. Then obligations of data fiduciaries, which means entities processing data. For example, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, they are data fiduciaries. So who are these? These are the companies. So obtain consent. So whenever we use, Instagram, Facebook, they seek our consent and we tick on it without reading it. We just tick on it. Provide clear notices on how data will be used. Protect data from breaches and unauthorized use, and delete data once it is no longer needed. Breach is void. So it protects data from violation and no one can misuse the data. Special rules for children and PWDs, persons with disabilities. Personal data of children below 18 years and PWDs with legal guardians can only be processed with the guardian's consent. So, the guardian of the child and guardian of the PWDs, which is being criticized. What is being criticized? Section 919 clause 1, which means when it comes to PWDs, the legal guardian will be taking decision on behalf of the PWDs. Now, why this is wrong, we will discuss in the next slide. Exemptions for government and business, which means the government can use our data without consent. For what? For national security, public interest, or law enforcement. So let's say I have committed a crime. Now the government wants to track my record. So government can use my data without my consent. Why? For public interest and law enforcement. Businesses, companies, both Indian as well as foreign, can collect personal data without consent. When it comes to legitimate use, for example, whenever you get a job, then they can use your data to verify your status. And companies who violate the provisions, rules, the the authorities can impose a penalty up to 250 crores, which means penalties can also be imposed. Then the act allows data to be stored or processed outside, which means our data can also be stored and processed outside the country, in some country, right? And then we have this data protection board. This board will oversee the enforcement of the law as well as handle complaints and impose penalties. So this board, data protection board, will be overseeing, will be managing or seeing the provisions of the data protection and digital protection and data protection act. I hope you understood right of persons with disabilities and then DPDP act. Now what is the issue? Section 9(1), it mandates that data fiduciary, which means the companies who process the data like Amazon, Facebook, etc., must obtain verifiable consent from a lawful guardian before processing data of children and persons with disabilities, which means the companies, whenever they process the data of children and PWDs, they have to take consent from whom? From the legal guardians, from the lawful guardians. Why this is an issue, we'll discuss. Now, definition of data principal. Who are data principal? Who are referred to as data principals? Individuals. Data principals, individuals. Data fiduciaries, the companies. The Act defines a data principal as a user like us, whose data is being collected, right? In section 2, it includes the lawful guardian within the meaning of data principal for PWDs. This section says that, or this section includes lawful guardian, which means lawful guardian will be the same as data principal, that is individuals. Meaning the guardian could be seen as having decision making power, which means the guardian, the lawful guardian, will be taking decisions on behalf of the people with disabilities. So the lawful guardian, the meaning of lawful guardian will be considered under the meaning of data principles. Data principles. Lack of clarity. The rules provide detailed illustration for obtaining parental consent. So how? For a child, how the consent is to be obtained, the rules mention it in detail how the consent is to be taken from a child or from the guardian of the child. But there are no such explanation for how consent should be obtained from a PWD's guardian. So how consent is to be taken from a child's guardian is given in detail, but how the consent of a legal guardian will be taken is not mentioned in detail. Why? We do not know. So there's a confusion about how the rule applies to PWDs. Now, guardianship for PWDs is governed by two laws. One, National Trust Act 1999. Now, this includes these disabilities, right? It provides for full guardianship, which means if a person is suffering from these disabilities, then full guardianship, which means the lawful guardian will take all the decisions on behalf of the PWD. Second is Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. Right? It applies to long-term physical, mental, intellectual or sensory impairments. It provides for limited guardianship, which means not all the decisions will be taken by the legal guardian, which means some of the decisions can directly be taken by PWD. Here, all the decisions, this one, all the decisions will be taken by the legal guardian, but here, not all the decisions will be taken by the legal guardian. There is limited autonomy given to the PWD. Now the National Trust Act's full guardianship approach, it contradicts the United Nations Convention. And the Right of Persons with Disabilities Act of 16 aligns with the United Nations Convention by supporting the autonomy, which means this act, it allows for limited guardianship. This no autonomy. So it contradicts with the United Nations Convention. This it aligns. However, in practical implementation, even under this act, limited guardianship often have limited real control, which means there are two acts. The National Trust Act, which allows for full guardianship. It contradicts the United Nations Convention. The second, Right of Persons with Disabilities Act. It gives limited autonomy, but in practical implementation, in a real world situation, the PWD would have very little power to take decisions, which means essentially with respect to both these laws, the legal guardian will have full power and control to take decisions on behalf of PWD, persons with disabilities. Now, what are the concerns? First, Section 9 assumes that having a legal guardian automatically means that cannot make independent. Now, a PWD can be in a position to take decisions, but the rule says that when you have a legal guardian, automatically the legal guardian takes a decision. Example, a PWD woman might need her guardian's approval to buy sanitary napkins online. This is a concern. Second, legal uncertainty in guardianship obligations. The question is, would the guardian face legal consequences for any misuse? We never know, because the rule or the rules are silent on such particular questions. Would the guardian be able to decline giving consent for specific platforms or transactions? So guardian would have power to take decisions. Would the guardian also have the power to decline giving consent? These questions are unanswered in the rules. Concerns about privacy. Now, platforms would need to ask users if they are PWDs. So here, Amazon will ask the user if they are PWD, right? And if the person is PWD, then the legal guardian consent is to be taken. Confusing definitions and unclear applications. The draft rules of the DPDP Act include physical disabilities under the provision, but there is no legal basis for appointing guardians for purely physical disabilities. Now, the law, the rules mention physical disabilities, but there is no legal basis, no legal provision for appointing guardians for people with disabilities, especially physical disabilities. And this creates confusion about who actually falls under this rule. Existing digital accessibility barriers. Even before addressing data protection issues, most online platforms are not accessible to PWDs, which means as of now, the current provisions are not PWD friendly. Now, a 2023 report states that popular applications like these companies had poor accessibility scores, which means the PWDs cannot access these very popular applications. And what is the way forward? You have to amend Section 9 to remove blanket guardianship requirement, which means here care has to be taken in to ensure that when a PWD is in a position to take decisions, then the legal guardian should not be taking decisions. which means here care has to be taken to ensure that the autonomy of PWD is retained and maintained. One. Second, define clear and limited criteria for guardianship based consent. Right, the draft rules attempt to limit the disabilities covered, but they remain vague. So specify that only PWDs with severe intellectual or cognitive disabilities require guardian consent, not all the PWDs. Introduce a self-declaration. Now these points are very easy. You can simply go through it and understand by yourself, right? So these are the some solutions. Now the DNA notes has also some extra points with respect to the first article. So I request you to please open the DNA notes. The link is mentioned in the comment box. Please open the DNA notes and refer to the extra points with respect to the first article. Also the way forward has like 7 to 8 points. So I request you to please go through these points. Right. So I hope you understood the first article, right? The main issue was with respect to section 9(1). The main essence was that the rules are silent about the legal guardianship, which means it seems that the rules are taking away the autonomy of the PWDs and resting the decision making authority with the legal guardian of PWD. This is the essence. I hope you understood the first article. Second article talks about Indian peacekeepers serve with commitment. So here we'll understand about the United Nations peacekeeping and the India's role. Can map under GS paper 2 under important international institutions. So question was asked in the year 14 on the United Nations peacekeeping operations and evaluate India's participation. What is the context? The United Nations Under Secretary General for Peace Operations has praised India. Why? Because India has been contributing significantly in the United Nations peacekeeping mission across the globe. So what is United Nations peacekeeping? Let's understand that first. Now, United Nations peacekeeping is a mechanism through which United Nations deploys forces in conflict zones to maintain peace, security and stability. It's a mechanism through which, like every country has their own troops, United Nations also has their own troops. Each and every country contributes to United Nations peacekeeping. And then wherever there is a conflict, the UN peacekeeping will deploy forces. Why? To restore normalcy. It is based on three key principles. First, consent of the parties. There are two, India and Pakistan are fighting. Now, if there is a consent, then the United Nations will deploy forces. Second, impartiality. And third, non-use of force. These are the three principles on the basis of which United Nations deploys or sends her troops to the conflict zones. Objectives: to prevent conflict, yeah, objective to prevent conflict, right? Protecting civilians, supporting political process and peace agreement, and helping in post-conflict reconstruction once the conflict is over, to build the institutions, democratic institution, and promoting governance that is for the welfare of people. These are the objectives of United Nations. It's like United Nations military. Now, United Nations peacekeeping is managed by Department of Peace Operations, which is part of United Nations. Then operations are funded by the assessed contribution from United Nations member. Now the 5 permanent members of UNSC. Which are the 5 permanent members? US, UK, France, China and Russia. These 5 permanent members, they contribute the most. Now let us discuss India's role. India has been one of the largest contributors. So far, right, India has deployed 5,500 personnel. India ranks 4th after Nepal, Rwanda and Bangladesh, contributing the highest number of troops. Now, Indian troops have been involved in multiple conflict zones like Congo, which is in Africa, then South Sudan, Lebanon, Central African Republic, especially in the African and the Asian region. Now, the Indian peacekeepers have gained global recognition. Why? For their professionalism, for the way they conduct themselves in the conflict zones and humanitarian efforts, which includes medical aid, infrastructure development and community engagement. I hope you understood the purpose of United Nations peacekeeping, that is to restore normalcy in the conflict zones, and both the parties have to give consent. Only then the United Nations can deploy the forces. Now the current challenges in the region Congo. So I request you to please open the democratic DRC in the African continent, because this country is recurring. The conflict is a long standing conflict. It's going on for months now, and it repeatedly comes in the newspaper and in the news. So questions are, or chances, probability is high that UPSC will ask a question from this region, that is countries surrounding DRC, African region. So please by heart the location of the country in and around the country, which are the countries bordering DRC. Now the United Nations peacekeeping is currently in DRC, but it is facing restrictions. Why? Because of another militant group known by the name M23. This rebel group is supported by Rwanda. Rwanda again is another country in the African continent. So please identify these countries in your Atlas book. Now, peacekeepers, including Indian troops, are actually, they are trapped in this region, especially the region which is under the M23 rebels. However, the United Nations Secretary General has assured that measures are being taken to ensure the safety of the peacekeepers, the Indian peacekeepers. Right? So please, these two countries, one and these two countries are important for your prelims examination. I hope you understood the second article. The next article, the title is the impact of ethanol on the environment. So we'll understand what is ethanol blending. You can map this topic under GS paper 3, that is environmental pollution and degradation. So question was asked, right, on the usefulness of the byproducts of sugar industry, which is, so this again pertains to ethanol as biofuel, Now, what is the context? The context is that the ethanol production, which is part of India's ethanol blended program, production of ethanol, which can be used as fuel, so as our dependence on the fossil fuel reduces. Now, this has become a subject of environmental debate. Why? Because the activists of environment state that the production of environment is leading to pollution, environment pollution. So, what exactly is the topic about? Let us try to understand. First, what is ethanol? Ethanol is a type of alcohol, right? Which is on the chemical formula of ethanol is C2H5OH. It is also referred to as ethyl alcohol. Second, it is commonly referred to as grain alcohol or drinking alcohol. It is volatile, flammable, which means catches fire, and colorless liquid. 1, 2, 3, each and every point is important for your prelims, so simply by heart it. These are the characteristics of ethanol, so please by heart it. Flammable, catches fire, colorless, volatile, commonly referred to as drinking alcohol or grain alcohol. So now, how is alcohol produced? One, through fermentation, and second, through the chemical process. So when it comes to fermentation, we have the natural method, which is using raw materials like sugarcane, corn, rice, wheat, molasses. Fermenting the raw process, the yeast breaks down sugar into ethanol and carbon dioxide, uses alcoholic beverages, biofuel, and hand sanitizers. Then the chemical synthetic method is petroleum based ethene, that is ethylene and water. So all you need to know is the production which involves fermentation using natural method as well as synthetic method, right? So which is the natural method and which is the synthetic method? Please remember this point as well as this point. So each and every point is important for your prelims. Now, what is the use of ethanol? The use of ethanol is as a biofuel, which means it is blended with petrol. Now, the essence of ethanol production is to reduce our dependence on the fossil fuels, that is oil. Why? Because it releases greenhouse gas emissions. So, the world is taking efforts to reduce the release of greenhouse gases, which means we have to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels. And how do we reduce? We are actually blending ethanol, which is derived from the natural process, and we are mixing ethanol with petrol, right? Which means after a few years, we'll reduce our import of oil. Why? Because we are mixing ethanol with petrol. This is not adulteration. Don't worry about it, right? So now ethanol is mixed with petrol to create E10, that is E10 represents 10% of ethanol and E20 20 represents 20% of ethanol is mixed with petrol. Reduce dependence on fossil fuels, and then uses one bioethanol, second in the alcohol beverages, that is beers, wine, whiskey and other alcoholic drinks, as an industry solvent, that is in the pharmaceuticals, in the cosmetics, in the paints, perfumes, and the in the woodwork they use varnish. This is it. So these are the uses. So I request to please by heart the uses of ethanol. So there are few things that you need to remember. One, what is ethanol, right? Then how is ethanol produced? Natural method, synthetic method, right? After that, the usage of ethanol. The purpose of ethanol, to mix it with petrol, reduce the dependence on fossil fuel, and then these are the uses. Please by heart the uses. These are the points that you need to remember for your prelims examination. And what is ethanol blending? It is nothing but it is mixed with petrol so as to reduce. So when blended mixed with petrol, it acts as an oxygenate, that is oxygen is added that reduces harmful emissions from vehicles. So E10 we already have discussed this particular point. And what is the government's target? The government has set an ambitious target to achieve 20% ethanol blending by 25-26. Right, which means every 1 liter of petrol would have 20% ethanol. This target aligns with the country's broader objective. What is it? To reduce import of oil, to reduce dependence on the fossil fuels. Now, to achieve this target, India needs to produce 1000 crore liters of ethanol annually. To achieve this target, which means 20% ethanol blending, 1000 crore liters of ethanol. As of 2024, the blending percentage has reached around 13-15%, up from 8% in 21. And the government is focusing on sugar bean based and grain based distilleries, which means natural method. Now, what are the key concerns? One is air pollution, which means the ethanol factories, they emit hazardous chemicals like these, which are carcinogenic, which means cancer causing chemicals. This water depletion, each liter of ethanol requires, it requires 8 to 12 liters of water. Water and soil contaminant, the factories discharge untreated effluents into rivers and canals, polluting the rivers. Weak environmental oversight. Now, the ethanol plant is classified under the red category, high pollution score. Still, the government gives them permission easily, and the companies who want to start their business can easily start their business, and no care is taken to take care of the pollution. This is the article about. I hope you understood the article. Next article, Trump's Russia-Ukraine policy hangs over EU-India talks. So we'll understand the implication of US foreign policy on India-EU relationship. So question was asked on Russia and Ukraine war. So what is the context? We know that the Russia and Ukraine war is going on since 2022. Now this is one of the significant, right, or so this war was started in the year 2022 when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This marks significant military conflict in Europe, right? Now, what is the reason behind the war? The Russians were of the impression, or Russians felt that Ukraine's membership of NATO would threaten the security of Russia, which essentially means that once Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, any challenge on Ukraine, all the NATO members would come together to defend Ukraine. Let's say since 2022, Russia and Ukraine are fighting a war. The moment Ukraine becomes a part of NATO, then the war won't be between Russia and Ukraine, but the war will be between Russia and NATO, which involves United States of America, France, Germany, UK, right? So, given the threat coming from the Ukrainian side, Russia launched a full-scale war against Ukraine to stop Ukraine, or to give a lesson, to pass a lesson to the Western countries not to interfere with Russia's security. Now, as of now, the Western countries, they are helping Ukraine with military aid, financial aid, and sanctions are imposed against Russia so that Russia's economy declines. Essentially, the war has started in the year 2022 the Western countries are supporting Ukraine, right? Until last month, when Joe Biden was the president, the Western countries were supporting Ukraine. Now there's a change in presidentship. Donald Trump has taken a different approach. But the point is, since 2022, all the Western countries have come together, that is, European countries, the American countries have come together and are supporting Ukraine in their fight against Russia. Billions of dollars have been provided to Ukraine to defend Ukraine against Russia. India has taken a neutral stance. India has not criticized Russia. Why? Because Russia is our age-old friend. We have not criticized Russia. We have taken a neutral stance, which means we state that only diplomacy and dialogue should bring, or dialogue and diplomacy should bring an end to the conflict. We are not against Russia nor against Ukraine. We are supporting both the countries. We are talking or engaging with both the countries. The Western countries are sort of pressurizing India to take a stance against Russia, but given the relationship between India and Russia, which is age old, India has not buckled under the pressure of the Western countries. So as I told you, when Joe Biden was the president, right, he was very critical against Russia. He also requested pressures India to take stance against Russia, but India did not listen. Now Donald Trump has taken a different approach in the sense that he says that America is not going to spend money to defend Ukraine. America under Donald Trump states that it is the European security is not a headache of America. The European security is not a headache of America. It's better for the European countries, European Union to tackle or handle the matter, and there is no need for America to intervene in the domestic affairs, or for that matter, in the conflicts of other countries. This is what Donald Trump has stated. Now, the implication, the US is repositioning itself. EU is looking for alternative strategic partner. As the support from the America is declining, EU is looking for another strategic player, and India fits into this picture. Now, the visit of European Union Commission, the visit of the President of the European Union Commission and 21 commissioners to India highlights the effort of EU to deepen economic, trade and technology cooperation with our country. Right? Especially the EU seeks closer alignment with India on supply chain resilience, the supply chain of essential minerals, right? Semiconductor, AI and green technology. We know that India has maintained a neutral stance. The Western countries pressurize India not to import oil from Russia, but India in fact increased her oil import from Russia. India has not imposed sanctions on Russia despite the fact that the Western countries have pressurized India. Now, which are the potential challenges in India-EU ties? EU is continuing its sanction against Russia. Now here, European Union wants that India should take a stance against Russia, but India will never take a stance against Russia. So this can be a sticking point. This can be a sticking point, especially with respect to India-EU bilateral trade and investment agreement. This agreement has been stalled for years, right, because of the tariff issue between both the regions. Tariff is taxes. Now, EU is gradually moving away from China, which means for EU, India fits into the picture and India can emerge as a major trade and investment partner. The areas where both EU and India can cooperate is AI, semiconductor, renewable energy, that is green technology. And as of the last decade, the trade between India and EU has grown 90% in the past decade. So the point is, given the strategic shift of America and given the importance of India as a rising global power, EU sees India as a strategic partner, and through cooperating with India, EU tries to resolve some of the global issues like the global supply chains. And this, yeah, and this is the end of the fourth topic. I hope you understood all the four topics. Now let us discuss few questions. The first question pertains to means the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, particularly Section 9(1) has raised concerns about disability right activists, right? So this is a question which we already have discussed. So in the introduction, you have to mention who are the people with disabilities, the persons with disabilities, and you have to mention the DPDP Act. Then in the body of the answer, you had to focus on the concerns raised by the disability rights activists with respect to section 9 clause 1. And then you can also highlight some of the other issues that the disabilities or PWDs face in a country. You can find the answer in the DNA notes, right? And then finally you have to mention how a solution can be arrived at, right? By amending section 9(1), by ensuring that the PWDs retain autonomy, and this is how you can frame the answer for question number 1. Any difficulties you face, please let me know in the comment section. Now these are the DNAs or questions of asked from the last DNA. Right to information. Section 8 clause 1J of the IT Act exempts personal information from disclosure if it does not pertain to any public. This is very true. If the personal information is of no use or if it's not in the public interest, there's no need to disclose it. Second, the RDA Act mandates that all information must be disclosed. No, all information need not be disclosed. So this one is incorrect. Option A is the correct answer. Next, the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme. It is a centrally sponsored scheme. Yes, it is not a central sector. It is a centrally sponsored, launched in 19, where the funding will be 60:40 years. Under the scheme, 6,000 per year is directly credited to the bank account who owns up to 2 hectares. Yes, even this one is correct. The beneficiaries to the scheme are identified through socio-economic card. All the three statements are correct for this particular question. And then we have the DNAs. These are the DNA questions from today's DNA based on today's DNA topic. So I request you to please go through it, right? And open the DNA quiz link in the comment section. Please open the link, attempt the three questions and post your score in the comment section, right? So that's the end of today's DNA. I hope you understood all the topics. If you think that this DNA session is helpful, then I please request you to hit the like, subscribe, and most importantly, share the DNA session so that each and everyone benefits out of the DNA session. Thank you so much for watching.